Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Forced Retirement, written by ack1308. Inspired by a word prompt, currently the world's most successful supervillain, you have renounced evil and agreed to turn yourself in. Some of the heroes who spend years fighting you are determined to prevent your peaceful retirement. Sirens sounded out in the distance. There were many of them, getting closer by the minute. All on my account, of course. Such had been the case for years. As the sound of helicopters joined the chorus, I stepped to the window and twitched the curtain open to admire the sea of flashing red and blue lights already present outside the fence. A hammer blow smacked into the outside of the high-tech polycarbonate, and I saw the fine white cracks radiating out from the impact point. I closed the curtain again and moved to one side. Whoever fired that sniper shot had almost certainly done so against orders. But I didn't feel like trusting my life to whoever they managed to dredge up with the hostage negotiator. Not that they needed one. I had no intention of harming the president. My presence in the Oval Office was only necessary so that I could pass on my message personally. "They're a little anxious to end me, wouldn't you say?" I asked the current incumbent in the Oval Office. He stared defiantly back at me from his seat behind the resolute desk but didn't say anything. While I hadn't gagged him, I'd taken care to fasten him securely to his chair. One has to observe tradition, after all. I moved over towards the door and gave the agents there a cursory once-over. Still breathing, still unconscious. That was probably for the best. I didn't want to appear to be sending mixed messages. Why, yes, I had actually left a trail of unconscious Secret Service agents and other law enforcement personnel on my way in to see the president. This wasn't sending a mixed message. With my reputation, clashing with serious, well-armed people was an absolute guarantee whenever I came within half a mile of an important government officials. Their continuing presence in the land of the living was testament to my chosen level of restraint. "Don't worry," I assured the president, turning back to face him. "I'm not angry that they're trying to snipe me, and I'm not going to hurt you because of it. In fact, I'm not here to harm you at all, or kidnap you, strap you to a nuclear missile, FedEx you to Russia, or any other things that I've done to your predecessors. They'd survived their experiences, of course. While I hadn't made things easy for the heroes to rescue them, I'd made it possible. The point had never been to harm the president, but to remind him of his mortality, while using the distraction to carry out some of my other aims. I've always been a fan of knocking over at least two birds with one stone. "Dad, what do you want?" he burst out, his tone a mixture of fear and anger. I really couldn't blame him. He'd no doubt been assured by the effectiveness of the defenses around the White House, and I'd more or less strolled through them without breaking step. "Finally," I said, rolling my eyes a little more theatrically than the question truly required. "I've been waiting for you to ask that question since I got you. It's simple. I'm here to let you know that I will be retiring as a supervillain and handing myself over to the authorities in precisely 1 week's time at, let us say, the Lincoln Memorial." He stared at me. You're what?" "Retiring," I repeated, "surrendering myself to the authorities. Do you wish me to use words of only one syllable?" His stare of disbelief redoubled. Are you joking? Is this some kind of riddle or trick?" "Not in the slightest," I assured him blithely. "The reason is simplicity itself. There is little I cannot do, and I find I've begun to approach the limits of my imagination." I was lying, of course, but he didn't need to know that. Everything I've ever aspired to achieve, I've done, up to and including rulership of the United States itself. Not for long, of course. I didn't want to rule the country. I wanted to have once ruled it. He frowned. "You've never taken over the United States. I'm sure I would have recalled it." "Oh, you remember it, but you don't know what you're remembering," I smiled, recalling my triumph at the time. 7 years ago, April Fool's Day, your predecessor was in the first year of an office, still finding his feet. I spirited him away in the middle of the night and replaced him with a highly complex robot double. My protégé signed several executive orders and played a number of pranks on White House staff through the course of the day, including yourself, as I recall. After he retired to bed, I reversed the swap. But for that day, I literally was the President of the United States. He stared at me, his jaw dropping. And the next day, he couldn't remember anything he'd done. Everyone thought that he had a microstroke and suffered a loss of short-term memory, but they couldn't find any evidence of one. I gestured and gave him a slight bow. Voila! He shook his head. So now you want to retire, just like that, and hand yourself into the authorities, so that I may have a fair trial as per the law of the land, I added, with a jury of my peers, of course, if you can find anyone who fits the description. And you'll just submit yourself to whatever prison term the judge decides on. His tone was decidedly skeptical at this point. So long as I do not consider it overly unfair, I countered. I've never murdered anyone who didn't actually deserve it, so I would consider any reference towards the death penalty to be a rather pushing your luck. What about life imprisonment without parole? He shot back. If you die behind bars, that's more than less the same as being executed. Not so. I shook my head. Many inmates have used lengthy prison terms to improve their education, or even write books. Given that I intend to live at least 150, I feel that I might have an epic science fiction or fantasy series in me. Perhaps even a movie deal. I turned my head slightly, bringing my more esoteric senses into play. Ah! Here come the big guns. I do not wish to endanger you or any of your minions, so I bid you good day. Remember, the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1 week. My awareness of incoming peril intensified, and I triggered the teleport function on my belt buckle. Time slowed dramatically for me, a side effect of the wormhole mechanism altering the laws of physics so that it could whisk me across the country in the blink of an eye. An instant later, I saw the window bulging inwards, and Turbo Max's fist impacted the spot where the sniper round had struck. Already weakened, the barrier shattered dramatically, and the hero emerged into the Oval Office. When he saw the president sitting at his desk, unharmed, he turned at super speed towards me. I gave him a cheery wave and saw his features contort with anger, but before he could get halfway to me, the teleport activated fully and dragged me away. 1 week later, as promised, I teleported into Washington, D.C. to hand myself over to the authorities. The familiar sight of flashing red and blue lights was easy to see on my approach, with the police cars in almost a solid block around the area. A bunch of officers were awaiting me at the foot of the steps, complete with manacles fit to adorn man 3 times my strength. I could also see SWAT officers standing in body armor, carrying riot shields and assault rifles. It was almost cute, the way they seemed to think that their accoutrements would be of any good if I chose to cause trouble. But I suppose everyone needs their security blanket. Slowly, so as to not startle anyone, I drifted down to the ground level at the far end of the reflecting pool. Step by step, fully aware that my actions would be seen as a height of arrogance, I walked along the surface of the water, allowing my anti-grav boots to barely ripple the pool as I passed by. To be honest, they would be entirely correct. I am indeed a particularly arrogant individual. However, I consider my arrogance entirely justified. I'm really good at what I do. Stop right there! The shout came from above me. I paused, allowing an exaggerated frown to cross my features for the benefit of the multitudinous cameras that were undoubtedly recording my progress, and turned to look upwards. Precisely as I had anticipated, Turbo Max and his team, I truly could not be bothered keeping up with whatever tiresomely pretentious title that they saddled themselves with, were flying down towards me. Every line of their spandex-clad bodies taut with anger. The hero himself, leading the pack, swooped low over the water and then came to hover directly in front of me. His oversized gauntlets, held out like a traffic policeman's, barred my forward progress. "Excuse me," I said politely, "but I have an appointment to be arrested just over there. Kindly get out of my way, please." "You are not going anywhere," he bellowed, veins bulging in his forehead. "You have made fools of the law too many times. You're going down now! Really? I raised an eyebrow. I practiced assiduously in the mirror for just such an eventuality, and looked him up and down. Just to you? Do recall the end result from when you attempted to single-handedly prevent me from stealing Fort Knox, yes? How long did it take you to get home after I teleported you to the middle of the Sahara? He sought an answer. I triggered my palm control, short-jumping me through where Turbomax was hovering, then continued my unhurried stroll towards my destiny. Turbomax once more reacted predictably, flying directly at my back while kicking in his power gauntlets and super speed. The impact, if he struck me, would have been equivalent to having a bulldozer land on me from 100 yards up. Survival at that point would have been problematic at best. He didn't strike me, of course. His fists came to within 2 feet of me. My personal protection field activated and teleported him, not to the Sahara this time. He didn't move from the spot. In fact, what I did was instead rotate his inertial frame of reference by 90 degrees. I could have made it so that he was redirected upwards, or even sideways. I didn't. Flying at full speed, gauntlets crackling with enough kinetic energy to turn any 2 ordinary people into pink mist by tapping them on the shoulder, he rocketed straight down, hitting first the reflecting pool, reflecting no longer, and then the concrete floor of the feature. Water flashed to steam over a large area, then chunks of concrete shattered upwards out of the crater he just created. Unbothered by the steam and the debris both, I had anticipated the scenario and taken precautions. I walked onwards, even as the water beneath my feet went everywhere but where it was supposed to. The rest of the team hurtled down to attack, but I skip-jumped forward again, this time appearing just before the group of U.S. Federal Marshals awaiting me. "Gentlemen," I greeted them, "would you prefer my hands before or behind me? I assure you, I will not make an ounce of difference. I intend to allow myself to be taken into custody no matter how hard the heroes fight against it." "No!" bellowed Laserfist, loosing a flurry of shots at me. I'd already widened my protective field so that the marshals were simply protected. The lasers went skyward as the field rotated the chunks of air that they were slicing through. "You don't just get to walk away!" Half turning towards him, I raised my voice enough to reach his ears. "Oh, but I do. Once I'm in custody, you are legally not permitted to attack me." Their response was as idiotic as I expected it to be. Over the years, I'd encountered Turbomax on numerous occasions, along with whoever he had persuaded to join his team and fight alongside him. On each and every occasion, I'd handed them a thorough and humiliating trouncing, then gone along on my merry way. He brought all of them along on this occasion, and it seemed the sight of me peacefully refuting their chance to wreak bloody revenge was too much for them to bear. Attack after attack rained down upon me, rather upon us, for it seemed that some of the so-called heroes possessed ranged abilities rather lacking in precision. I continued to protect myself and the marshals, even as the SWAT teams retreated behind their shields, and the Lincoln Memorial suffered quite a lot of incidental damage. One of the marshals stepped forward and raised his voice. "Can you do something?" His tone wasn't quite pleading, but it was definitely making a firm request. I shrugged, even as my protection field shrank a little. It was all for show, of course. I'd packed extra energy cores, just in case. "To make matters clear, are you requesting that I subdue the heroes currently attempting to kill both myself and you fine gentlemen?" We glanced at each other, then looked at me. "Yes!" declared the one who had made the request. "Very well, then." I turned towards the assembled heroes and Turbomax, who had just clawed his way out of the crater and was now dripping wet. With a simple gesture, I triggered the return to sender option, targeting each of the attacking heroes with a concentrated blast that would suffice to knock them insensible without outright killing them. It is sad world when villains spend more care in non-lethal attacks than heroes do. As they fell to the ground, I turned once more to the marshals. "Now I believe you had a duty to perform." The manacles closed over my wrists, and for the first time, I was the subject of a Miranda reading. 2 more experiences to cross off my bucket list. I peacefully allowed them to lead me away to a waiting armored truck, while other law enforcement personnel moved in to scoop up the malcontent heroes. A week later, I stood in open court while the manacles were ceremoniously removed from my wrists. The judge, who had been presiding over the case, looked as though he had been sucking on lemons for the entirety of the week, which was an actual possibility. We have made an earnest and thorough effort to select jurors who would be both members of the superpowered community and impartial to your case, and not one potential member of this panel has yet to make it through screening. As he read off the prepared statement, he gritted his teeth as though he wanted to tear it to shreds. Due to the 17 separate attempts by superheroes on your life, even when you were in Supermax solitary, it has been deemed that to merely hold you in custody is a risk to life and limb of your guards. As we can neither hold you nor try you, the extraditionary decision has been made to release you under your own recognizance. You could scarcely do more damage out there. You're free to go. I nodded respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. Turning, I strolled nonchalantly from the courthouse. I didn't even have to worry about looking over my shoulders anymore. Many of the heroes were now under arrest for their attacks on my life, and the rest were keeping their heads down after heavy scrutiny from the media. For myself, I was a free man. All according to plan. End of story. Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Bezic, Try Again 95, Pudic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Athelia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.